Hello everybody, Obscure Titan here, and I have the results for the Kuaka art contest. So, what I was going through when reviewing the submissions that y'all have submitted in my Discord server, I decided to go ahead and kind of go for a 5 category rankings to see which ones kind of stack up in total for each. So if it had like the most appealing story, or rather it has the highest story or like the appeal, character, and all that stuff. The style would be more so on how lenient it is with the Shantae style and how it's able to use it. Now, it's not necessarily entirely the case. You could use a different style and it would still be able to work with your entry. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the list of entries that have been submitted to me. So I want to thank everyone for participating. This is completely unscripted, so you're going to hear me ramble quite a bit, but I'm going to try to get on point with this. Excuse me for the voice crack. Let's go ahead and get started. So starting with the 6th entry, here we have Talatia's entry. So from what I was able to examine, it's Kuaka in her ninja outfit, and it's primarily blue, and I can see that she has like a dagger or something of that. She still maintains her hair and all that stuff. So far I think it's pretty serviceable for what it's able to serve. I think it does have some uniqueness going on to it. I especially love the fact that he's included the Arabian insignia that has been pretty much been a thing for Kuaka for 5 years, or 6 years I would say. Ever since I wrote her, she was meant to have this insignia in her lamp and all that. I guess I could have seen a little bit more with the posing. I could have seen a little bit more character going on other than just standing there as a ninja, which it's not necessarily a bad idea in itself, and I think it could still work. I do think that the background does clash a little bit with the, well, I wouldn't say clash, but just more kind of blending in with the character. So if you're looking at it from a distance, it would be a little difficult to tell. But I mean, even with that, I would have liked to see maybe a more interesting background. Even with a pose like this, you could still have something that would give a little bit more interest to that. So I think there just could have been a little bit more to that, but overall, not bad. Alright, moving on to the next one is Neko. So I know it doesn't look like that there's a lot at first, but I can tell that Neko is really putting in some thought into this, and I can tell that there is a little bit more to the story that's going on. I can tell that, Kuaka just calling her cat salad, that was actually it's actually pretty funny and wholesome. I can tell that her reaction was just kind of getting all uppity about it. That's actually pretty neat. And I can tell that there is a pretty good amount of balance going on between the two. I'm not so much concerned about the style itself. In fact, I think it still managed to work pretty well with the story. I think maybe I could have liked to see a little bit more going on just in the background. Not that it has to be a big thing, but maybe just a little bit more to it that I would have appreciated to see. But overall, not bad. Definitely pretty interesting to see. There's definitely more of a story that's going on in this sequence, especially with the dialogue that's added in. That's pretty neat. So the next two that I'm going to be showing off was originally going to be a bit of a tie between the two, but I had to choose who's going to be the third winner. So you'll have to bear with me once I get to this fourth part. So Zeta's entry over here. I will say that I really do love the style of this character. I think just the appeal of the style just works great. I think the only thing that might be holding it back by just a little bit, maybe there could have been just some kind of story or interaction that's within this sequence. Maybe we could have seen her in some kind of cave. Maybe you could say that she's coming out of her lamp or something like that, which the pose itself can still stay the same, but you could have some kind of smoke that's kind of going around her. I think that's just kind of what I'm thinking on how that could have gone a bit higher than, this could have easily been a little bit higher on the list and would have been one of the winners. Like, seriously, I think just a little bit more going on to it would have really taken it over the top. But the appeal just on itself is phenomenal. And definitely got the character in, especially the style. I do really like that very much. So it's a very good entry. But the next one I'm going to be showing off, Lenny. So as I said back then when I was kind of going back and forth between this and Zeta's, because I think both of them are really good for what they were able to bring in. I just think the main thing that had me consider Lenny's to be at the third spot would have to be due to the fact that the style that they used was pretty well done as far as, how things are composed or anything like that. I will say that it was a little bit too dark to tell, like, what's going on. And I think there could have been... I think it's just maybe the lighting that might be a little bit off. But honestly, everything else from what I'm seeing here is just great. There's a really great amount of story that's going on. I could tell that there is a good use of character that's going on. The appeal of it's also pretty well done, especially with how the chains and the lamp powers are kind of going through. It does work really well from what it looks like. I know that the style may not be the most Shantae-y, but I think just the use of it in the storyline like this, where maybe we're just kind of seeing a darker, a more melancholic version of Kuaka, where she's just completely torn and just isn't really having that. I think that's a pretty good scenario with what if she ends up being a villain and all that, so I think that's pretty well done. But I guess you could say maybe lighting might be the only thing that might be putting it a little lower. I think it could have gone higher for that, but honestly, I think this is a really good entry, Lenny. That's a really impressive use of a storyline as well as with character. I think that works pretty well. But the next two, they're the real tie, and I had to decide which one gets to be the second, which one gets to be the first, just based on a few things. It has to do with how the character is being used as well as how the story is being used. This next one, I'd say this would have to perhaps be a really great use of character that's going on here. So it's second because I think in terms of how the overall structure of the composition goes, it goes really well, especially with the character interactions with, this Egyptian cat character that's interacting with Kuaka's hair. I'd say it definitely has more of a wholesome feel going on here with this. I especially do love the fact that, I think this could have had like a Shantae style, but even with this still works really well, especially with how the characters are expressing to one another. It uses it very nicely. I think the structure just goes pretty nicely in here and there. I don't think I have really any other better way of saying it. I'd say it's really a good composition as well as a great amount of character. And I think the story still works pretty well in this piece. Yep, especially with the character interactions. So definitely great work here, Sabinki, as always. And in hindsight, I think that your past entry from 2020 could have gone much higher, probably up to 1, maybe at the second at very least. Because looking back at it, I think it was an amazing piece you made 5 years ago, and yeah, it's definitely gotten better over time. So I really enjoyed that piece. But this one's also really good, and I think you really captured the overall structure of Kuaka's character and just the Egyptian setting. But it's now time for the number 1 winner of the contest, and that goes to Gigi. So remember how I said that Cass's entry was great just based on the character interactions? I think that this is great just based on the storyline and just having perhaps the most character that I would expect to see from Shantae and Kuaka together. And, you know, having this right here is perhaps something that you would expect in a Shantae series. I mean, if that ever ends up being a thing, but the composition is excellent. I think you've pretty much put the characters in a really good amount of screen time here and here. There's definitely a background that really does add a lot to the storyline, as well as what's going on. And I especially love the fact that you've added in visual effects to it and an object. That's a really great detail that you added in, just so that it's not a character that stands there or has an object, but you really took the time to have more pieces here and there for people to really feel invested in what's going on. And I think that's something that's worth appreciating, because when you make a composition like this where you have characters that are interacting with pieces like this and you have a background, that's a lot that you can really take in. You know, it's the amount of coloring is great. I can tell that you've really paid attention to detail with those. I especially love the fact that you've given both Shantae and her mother the revenge, Risky's revenge style. It really does go well with this composition that you've created, and especially with Kuaka specifically. I think you've really nailed that in very nicely. So yeah, do love it. It's a really great piece. So congratulations, Gigi, for winning the contest. And I want to thank everybody for... Let me go ahead and go back to the first image. So I want to thank everybody for joining in this contest. I know there's been a slightly smaller turnout than it was 5 years ago, but for those of you who have been around and have been in this contest, you've been great as always. Thank you for joining. And to those of you who are new here that have joined this contest, also thank you for joining in. So this has been Obscure Titan for this Kuaka art contest. Thank you all for joining, and I will catch y'all next time. Over and out.